Hello guys, David Vose here. It's a beautiful day here in Red Mesa, New Mexico. And I didn't do a video for a couple days for a couple of reasons. One, I'm pouring or building the floor in the dome. Going to be pretty interesting, and I'll show you that. I should have it done in a couple days. But two, I could tell from the last video I did, not the one with the horses, but you know, we were on the subject of Mary Magdalene and Jesus and the priesthood and Lazarus and Osiris and that subject, and Caesar and Cleopatra. And you know, I thought I could just jump right in and tell you guys some things that are true. But it's kind of like going in and rearranging somebody's house. It might even be better, more convenient. It might be easier to live that way. More organized. But if you become accustomed to a certain way your house is, you don't want anybody to mess it up. You don't want anybody to change it around. We all have these concepts in our head. It's our ecology in our mind. It's the way we think. It's become comfortable to us. Because a lot of things in this world are addictive. Most everything is, including thoughts. And usually when you walk up to somebody and you say, I need to take that from you, they're like, no, that's mine, you know. And you say, no, wait a minute, I have to explain. I'm going to give you something better. What is it? I don't know. What is it? We're kind of curious. And we listen and we're like, oh, I'm going to give you a chocolate bar, you know, for that marshmallow. Oh, I don't know. I really like this marshmallow. Well, the chocolate bar is really good, and you try to describe it. Well, I've never had a chocolate bar. I don't want that. Well, they're missing out because they don't know what it is. And, you know, it's like with lots of things in the world. Like, for instance, I've noticed that, personally, growing up, I wasn't around the ocean. We didn't eat fish. And I didn't like fish because I didn't really eat it much. I didn't like asparagus. I didn't like broccoli. You know, things, spinach, weird things that Mom didn't make a lot of, and I knew Mom and Dad would eat that kind of stuff, and people like, or caviar or something, or lobster. I never had any of that, so I don't, or crab. I never in my life have had any of that, and for me, it doesn't taste good. I mean, basically, the only kind of fish I like is like tuna. I don't even like salmon, really. I mean, I'll eat it, but then you talk to people who are maybe more wealthy or have had these kinds of foods. And to them, it's a delicacy. They'd eat caviar every day. It's food for kings. I guess I'm not a king because I don't like caviar. Now, I understand I could get used to it. I didn't like figs because we never had figs when I was growing up, and they're all gushy and everything. I know people don't like bananas because they're slimy, or avocados. I've learned to like avocados, but I still, a little, you know, weirds me out a little bit sometimes because they're so slimy. I know a lot of people don't like eggs because, I think it's because, ooh, they really don't look appetizing. It's kind of like caviar, but I love eggs because I grew up on eggs. It's something that we all had for breakfast. Now, I know I'm stretching this out, but I'm trying to make a point. What we think in our mind is very precious to us. It's our way of thinking. That's why you have people that join religions and they'll never quit. They'll never leave that organization because that's all they know. I mean, you can give people scientific facts that prove the world was 4 billion years old. And Christians won't believe that at all. They just won't believe that. Even though the Bible actually teaches that. I mean, the Bible teaches an evolutionary transmigration, reincarnation, millions and billions of years. But if you get to believing something that's false, even if it doesn't even make sense. Oh, I believe in the literal flood that Noah got in the boat and put all the animals in the world in that boat. Well, that's impossible. Oh, that don't matter. You think God can't do it? God can do anything, Dave. Yeah. Or how about when the sun stood still in the Bible? Did it? Did it represent something? Was it that the earth shifted on its axis and it looked like it stood still? I mean, there are a lot of... We don't have to make an excuse. Like, it wasn't really a miracle. It was some sort of quinkydink that happened right at the same time the guy said, you know. Or maybe it was just a parable. We have a lot of questions. But however we come down on the issue, that's what we were taught. That's what we feel comfortable with. And no matter how many times somebody tells us something, we probably aren't going to accept it. Because it brings up a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. That doesn't mean there aren't answers. That doesn't mean that if we knew the truth, it wouldn't be even better. So we're talking about Jesus being the son of Caesar and Cleopatra. And I've shown some indications of that, but not really have I given you guys any real proof, because the proof is really, really going to be complicated and convoluted. It's going to raise so many questions, because there are so many factors that are involved in this. Factors like Josephus. Who was he? Factors like people don't know anything about Caesar. Did you know he was Pontifex Maximus? And before that, I mean, that's the high priest of all the world. And remember, there's two priesthoods. The Judean priesthood is the lower priesthood. The higher priesthood is the Zadokite priesthood, or the Melchizedek priesthood. And we've talked about the the Vestal Virgins and the Flamens and all of this. What? That's Rome. That's the pagan. That's evil. So see how your mind's like, oh, no, but what you don't understand is that all of the world is Israel. And when Judah, who is prophesied to be the king and have the scepter of the world, until he who comes who has the legal right, which is Jesus, Judah was to be the man who would be the lineal royal bloodline. So, when Judah gave birth, by the way, by a woman named Tamar, which was a Canaanite priestess, and when she gave birth to twins. Now, when the woman was giving birth, one of the babies stuck his hand out, and they tied a red ribbon around his hand and pulled it back in. She put the red ribbon to show which one came out first. That was Zerah. Well, he pulled his hand back in, and then out pops Perez. They named it Perez because that means the breach. And the nurse says, wow, this baby sure did make a breach. So, who's really first? Well, the first baby out the womb was Perez. That's the flesh. The second child is the spirit. But, you know, the Nag Hammadi library talks about how it's kind of like women. Well, a woman's from a man, so therefore a woman's subject to man. But Paul says, no, neither is the man without the woman, nor the woman without the man, because every man is born from a woman. Oh, so there's always other ways to look at it. And so the same thing here with this. Which one of these children were first? Well, to prove that Zerah was first, they tied a red ribbon around it. But it didn't actually get born first. And so it's kind of like that. And so in the Nag Hammadi library it says, Jesus said, if you think that the spirit is first and the flesh is second, or that the flesh came from the spirit, he says that would be a miracle, which is the miracle of life. The flesh comes from the spirit. The mind is the source, the preeminent. And so you're like, well, that'd be a miracle. I can't believe that. But he says, if you think that the flesh came first and then the spirit. Like we're all physical, only mortal. We're not immortal beings. First we're mortal, then we'll get immortality. He said, no, that would be a miracle of miracles. In other words, immortality cannot be taken from mortality. We must be immortal to begin with, or else we could never be immortal in the end. So we have these kind of analogies in the scriptures. And here we have who's really first. Well, Perez was born first, which represents, born, popped out of the womb first, fully, complete, popped out. They gave birth to Perez, which is the lineal descendants of the King David. But there would be another king who was actually first. Is that saying that King David's not the true king? No, King David was the true king. And I've covered this before, but David was of both lines. And this is why he was born in Bethlehem. That's why Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Because that is on the border between Ephraim and Judah. Sometimes it was called Bethlehem of Judea. Sometimes it was called Bethlehem of Ephratah. Ephratah is just the spelling of Ephraim, or the land of Ephraim. We find that David was son of Jesse, the Ephraimite. So he was not even from Judah, he was from Ephraim. But David was really from Joseph, which goes back to that Canaanite woman, Diana, the woman who was the sister of the 12, who had relations with Shechem and had a daughter named Asenath who married Joseph. This is who had the son Ephraim. So Ephraim is of the lineage of the Canaanite. And this goes back to Elimelech, El of Molech, of the Canaanite. And Ruth was the wife of this lineal descendant of Canaan, Naamah and Elimelech. Their sons, both of them, they had two sons to continue the Melchizedek line, and they both died. So Boaz of the house of Judah came to raise up seed for his brethren. It's temporary. He's just raising up seed for his brethren. The true lineage is from Ephraim. So Jesus had both. That's how he healed the breach. But there's a breach. Something has happened. There's the flesh and the spirit. And in David's life, he had both of those things going on to prefigure all of this. But this is why we have children coming from the woman and children coming from the man. And there's all these allusions to two priesthoods. But when the true Messiah would come, certainly he would have to heal the breach. There's got to be some kind of a breach. So the other kid that's not down there in Judea, another king somewhere. Where is this other king? As we've said, Zerah had a son named Danos. And Danos is the lineal descendants of the people that went to Troy and also Aeneas. And this is the legends of Rome and the lineage of Venus. So it was a divine birth. This is how the legends go. And mankind to this day still don't understand it. They're like, oh, how could a man be born from a deity? That's ridiculous. They were demi-deities. Well, they were the gods. They were the divine beings, and they were royal bloodlines. So were the deities really having children with men? No. The deities were the patriarchs, as we've said. It's a royal bloodline going back to Adam. That's all it is. It's the particular bloodline from one who was given the power to reign on earth. And we know that was Judah. And so, Julius Caesar is of a certain gen. And remember, that's the name where it says this gen will not pass away, meaning the race. Not a generation or a span of time. But a gen is a family or a race. And so, Julius Caesar is of a particular lineal descendant from Zerah. Now, most people today have no clue. There's so much history that we don't know. The average person has no clue. We know all about the Bible and Jesus and the Old Testament, some of us. A little of that. were very vague on Egyptian or Sumerian or Babylon, any of this other stuff. Just what we've been told by our pastors and our historians, and they don't tell you much. They don't know much. But they could have known. Modern historians could know, but it was never taught to them. And it's all still there in the books, but they don't read them and they don't understand them. But there's a place called Alba Longus, which is long, Alba, the mountains, like up in northern Italy, and up in near Greece. And this is where these individuals like Aeneas originally came, of this royal bloodline from Danis back from Zerah to Judah. This is where the Greeks talk about Hercules, right? He's the strong man who is this powerful half deity, half man. This is, all these mythological stories are just as important as our Bible, because it picks up the story of Zerah. And Zerah is that king who will one day heal the breach. And so when Jesus came walking into Jerusalem, and if you believe he's the Messiah, then you have to understand this, because he's got to be somehow or another going to heal that breach, or else he's not the Messiah. And therefore he must be of the line of Zerah. And this is why we call him a Nazarene. And that's the particular branch. Nazarene means a branch of the royal lineage of Judah. Now, Daniel was a branch of the line of Judah, and he went to Persia and became the head of the Magi, or Zoroastrian. Zerah, Esther, Zoroaster. Esther is the woman in some of the pronunciations or languages or stories. But it's always Zerah, and we have the Czars, the Khazars, the Caesars, all of these czars, Nebuchadnezzar, we've talked about all this, and these czars, which is Caesar, because people say, we don't know where this word Caesar came from. Somebody was saying, oh, that Caesarean birth you were talking about doesn't come from Caesarion, the child of Caesar. It comes from some other Caesar that was brutal and vicious and ate somebody's baby or something. And that's not true. Caesar, they claim that Caesarion comes from, maybe not even Caesarion, but maybe Caesar's dad, Julius, or even his dad. And they're not quite sure. I'm just saying that there is an indication there that out of all these Caesars, the only one that was ever called Caesarion was little Caesar, or Isa, son of Isis, son of Cleopatra the seventh. Now, that's beside the point, but it does tell you there's a lot there. But the thing of it is, people are wondering, why would Jesus come from Caesar? Who's Caesar? Well, Caesar was of this ancient priesthood that today we don't know anything about. The Vestal Virgins, the Flamins. What is the Flamins? Historians don't even know. Flamins were, that means the flame. They were the flames that ate up Troy of the line of Zerah, and they fled the flames, and they become the first of the lineage, and they were the priests. And they set up a place there in Italy, where Rome is. There was the 7 mountains, 7 hills. And right in the middle of the 7 hills was another hill. And that hill was the Palatine Hill. Palatine is where we get the word palace. So it was the great palace. Today we just say, it's a palace, whatever. It's a beautiful home. It was more than a beautiful mansion home. It was the royal seat of the Aeneas and Romulus and Remus, and these individuals came down to Julius Caesar. He was of the lineal descent of this high priesthood, where they made the priesthood, and they built the temple to Jupiter. Oh my goodness, it's pagan date. No, Zeus, Jupiter, Latin, Zeus, Greek. Zeus is the son of Uranus. Jesus said, my father is Uranus. All the way through the New Testament, Theos, Theos, Theos is the deity. And Theos is the Attic, Greek, Athenian spelling of Zeus. So Zeus is just somebody else in the Hebrew Bible. We know that Zeus was the son of Uranus. And Uranus had 3 sons, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So Anu, or Noah, had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we know that he's Shem. So, for a king to be the son of Zeus, it meant he was the son of Shem. And for him to be a czar or a Caesar that reigned and ruled over the world, they were the greater priesthood. These Judeans had no clue that they were just a little lesser priesthood. They could perform these laws and rituals and carnal commandments that was to be done away. So we know who Caesar was. He was of this, he acted as priest, high priest of Jupiter at this area there in Rome, long before he was ever Caesar, or before he was ever the emperor of Rome. But Caesar was elected to the office of Pope, Pontifex Maximus, long before Christianity. And there was a religion there in Egypt that Cleopatra was officiating over called, remember we have Mary Magdal. Magdal or Migdal, it means the tower. And what is that tower? It's a specific thing. It's in Egypt. The Bible talks about it. It's in Egypt. And the tower that they built was at Heliopolis. Now, our Bible, in the Septuagint, calls it the city of On. Remember, John was baptizing, and he was from Beth Ani, which is the house of On. The house or temple of On was in Egypt. And that's where Osiris was, and he had these two sisters, Myrte and Mary. It's the same story. Jesus talks about Lazarus who died and went to hell. Well, Osiris died. And Jesus raised Lazarus up. So this story is beyond any doubt the same story. But because Christians have been only fed part of the story, and they don't know that it's like 1/10 of the story. We don't have all the facts. So we don't understand that we're just apostatized. We're gone back to the lower. The Judeans went down into Babylon and came out, and they didn't know where their ancient ancestral home was. They didn't know where this Jerusalem had been. Remember, hundreds of years passed. They didn't know where it was. Well, they did know, but there was an effort to create a Jerusalem in Palestine, what we're calling it now, up there in that little area south of Lebanon. But that wasn't the true temple. That's not where Solomon built his temple. And the Apostle Paul tells us that this is the Jerusalem that is now here, up there in that area, where Jesus went to that brood of vipers and told them right straight to their face that they were hypocrites and that their father, that their deity was a liar and a manslayer or a murderer. But Paul says that the Jerusalem then in that area was of Hagar. She was in bondage to her children. She was the servant, the slave girl. She wasn't the free woman. Now, where was the real Jerusalem? Well, the funny thing is that they've hidden this from you. The true Jerusalem is, as we said, Uru, Salam, means the city of light. Uru is light. Ur, Ar, Or, Ra. It was originally called Ra or Ur. And the Greeks changed the name to Heliopolis, which means the sun, heliocentric, right? And that is a little place just north of present-day Cairo. I mean, it's just right in the outskirts, the suburbs of Cairo. And that was ancient Heliopolis. And that is also the city of On. And that, my friends, is where the Jerusalem was. And it was literally called Jerusalem. And it's so funny to me, not funny, it's sad to me that the world doesn't know this, because they seem to be very fond of Josephus's works. But Josephus writes all of the wars of the Jews and all of this history, and he tells you about the Jerusalem that was there on the location at Heliopolis. There had been, after Heliopolis was destroyed, it kind of like desolate for a while, and then when the Jews came back, they rebuilt the Jerusalem, and they set up the high priest On. They call him Onias. And there's some confusion about, they think it's Onias II or Onias III or something from the Hasmonean dynasty, but that's not even what it's about. Josephus says things that they say, oh, he must have been mistaken. He says it was some Onias that lived 300 years before Christ. Well, who's that? Because the other Onias was like 170 something, right? The temple, this is what's really interesting. This is in Josephus's works. The Talmud mentions it. Other historians mention this Jerusalem, the sanctuary where they had this other priesthood from On, who was of the Zadokite line, that officiated in a Jerusalem that was built and restored at Heliopolis on the location and lasted 400 years. It was destroyed, get this, in 70 AD, just like the other Jerusalem, because Titus Vespasian destroyed them both, because he didn't want anybody worshiping anywhere, because remember, Titus Vespasian was not in the line of Julius Caesar, because when Julius Caesar died, of course, the devil came in. That's why Jesus died. They murdered him, and they tried to get rid of all of his descendants. They got rid of Cleopatra, and Cleopatra, or Mary, had to go to Marseille, France, and they kind of went underground. And anyway, we've told all that story. But what I'm telling you is that Mary of Magdala is no doubt, once this story is understood and you go into the history books and you look at this, there's no doubt that this tower, or the Migdal, the tower, was at Jerusalem, the restored Jerusalem, the city of On. And as I've been telling you for a long time, Jerusalem that's in that area of Palestine's a hoax. That's not the true one. That's the lower. The real Jerusalem's at Heliopolis, or the Temple of the Sun. And the real priesthood was there, all the way down to Jesus. And Jesus was, John the Baptist says, are you the one? Because remember, John the Baptist was in the wilderness. Well, we'll talk about who John the Baptist was. The greatest man ever born from a woman, coming from a man that we call the Messiah, true deity of deity, a very deity, equal and one with his Father in heaven. And he was born of a woman. And he said, there's never been born of woman a man greater than John. So we're going to have to discuss here who this John was. But why would Jesus marry this priestess from Heliopolis? Well, Caesar was of the Zero line, a priest of that line. In other words, not just a priest, but a king priest, a Zadokite priest, a Melchizedek. Meli means king. Melchizedek means king of righteousness. So the Melchizedek priesthood is a king. It's the emperor. It's the king of the world. They're higher than the Pontifex Maximus. So the only person that ever held that true rank was Julius Caesar, and then Jesus Christ, or his son, Isa. The individuals like Augustus that came after usurped that power and that throne. But that's okay, because Jesus is the true king and always will be. And Mary Magdala was that priesthood from Egypt, which is the great marriage that was the original Zadokite priesthood there, that finally married the Zerah line, which healed the breach. So we'll talk about that probably over the course of several videos. We're going to have to do a series, and we're going to be talking about this much, much more, because there's so much I want to tell you. I want to tell you the story of Alba Longus and the Flamins and the Vestal Virgins. We never really got to the Vestal Virgins, because I could never really get it in there, explain it to you without telling you the whole story. And it's so long, and when I start telling you these stories, I think most of you roll your eyes and you don't believe it. Because you say, no, wait, Jesus was from Jerusalem over here, and there is no other Jerusalem, and you don't know what you're talking about, and he wasn't the son of Caesar. Well, I'm going to show you and prove to you that he was. But Christianity has lied to us. So I'm going to get right into that here in just a second. But before we do, I just want to say, one of the biggest problems we have, people are looking at the story of Jesus, and they don't know about the other Jerusalem that was for centuries there at Heliopolis and restored there for 400 years until it was destroyed in 70 AD. I don't know why the world has never been told all of this. I don't know why we don't know more about Caesar and his son, Isa, the son of deity. I don't know why we're never told that this calendar was started from the birth of that child, Isa, son of Isis, who was Julius Caesar's son. And every kingdom recorded the star that was seen. All of this is in the Bible. And we say, well, that's all well and fine. It makes a little sense, but it must not be true. Because somebody was saying the other day, well, wouldn't Pilate have known that this guy named Jesus was the son of Caesar? Well, yes, he did. But you see, Josephus and Pliny and Philo and these individuals were from Alexandria. Remember, the Heliopolis Library was taken to Alexandria. They made a tower there. And it's Alexandria, named after Alexander the Great, but that's where the lineal descendant of the Ptolemies continued. And the religion of Heliopolis continued. And they all worshiped there. I mean, Titus even went and believed in this temple down at Heliopolis, a sanctuary called Jerusalem. And went there and did miracles, and there's stories about all of this, but we don't hear any of it. But Titus Vespasian was very knowledgeable and understood very well where Jerusalem actually was. See, there's so many things we're unaware. First of all, people think Egypt is Egypt and Israel is Israel and Rome is Rome, and that's just all in their little spots. But they don't understand that the whole book of Daniel is the king of the north, the king of the south. They don't even know what this is. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses don't know. You read Adventist literature, they're not quite sure. They come up with different ideas, and everyone's got different ideas. But the absolute fulfillment of all of this is very, very obvious. It's talking about the Antiochus Epiphanes, which was the northern king, and Philopator, or the Ptolemaic king, which was the southern. And they were fighting in the middle of the Syrian king, and the Egyptian king was Jerusalem in the middle. And there was the king of the north was the Syrian, and the king of the south was Egypt, and they were fighting. And then it says the king will come down, the northern king, and defile the temple. That was Antiochus Epiphanes, who slaughtered a pig on the altar. But what people don't know is that the Ptolemy line went to Jerusalem and took all of the prominent Judeans, just like Babylon took them all to Babylon. We say, oh, they all went to Babylon. Well, there might have been some left in the land, but for the most part, they were all taken to Babylon. Well, here, it happened again. The Bible tells you, but nobody knows it, that the Ptolemaic line took all the children, and especially the prominent individuals, and the powerful men, and the elite, and many of the others, and took them all to Egypt, to this place called Heliopolis, and they rebuilt their temple. We are never told this. And we don't know the history of that and the Caesars and how they had a covenant. They worked together. They were prominent individuals in the Egyptian government. They were the Egyptian government. They were the Egyptians. And so the fact that Caesar and all of the powerful people were always marrying these Cleopatras is because they were of the lineage of this Heliopolis temple, and had their lineage going back to the Zadokite Melchizedek priesthood of On. So there's a lot we got to unpack here. But yes, they knew it, and when Josephus wrote about it, he wrote about it, but we're not aware of anything he wrote. Yes, Jesus is a real person. Yes, Josephus is a real historian, and he was accurate and spoke the truth. And he mentions the beheading of John the Baptist. He also talks very literally about the murder of James the righteous, or the Zadokite priest. He mentions these things because they were very important. He mentions the Essenes, but the Essenes weren't a little group out at Qumran. That was only one small group, and the stuff that they were talking about, the teacher of righteousness, wasn't in their group. It was something they were talking about. It was a worldwide phenomenon. The Essenes were all the way up at the temple of Artemis. And by the way, that original temple there at Heliopolis, once it was destroyed, then they rebuilt a temple called Bustatus or something. And that was the temple of the lion. And so it later became Leontopolis, the city of the lion. Who is the lion? Well, and then later on it's called the cat. So people get confused. But it's the lion. And who is the lion? It's Osiris. The Messiah would be the son of Osiris. Well, in our Bible, it would be the son of Judah, the lion. Yeah, Judah was called the lion, and so Jesus was of the tribe of Judah. But Jesus was the lamb. But Judah, his father, was the lion. It was the same religion that they were doing before Christ came. They were doing a religion of, as we said the other day, Serapis Christ. We know it as Serapis Christ because they don't want you to know really what that is. Yes, he was a Christ or the anointed or the king, but it wasn't Jesus. Serapis is a combination of the word Osiris, Osira, the O is missing from it. I guess they do that to confuse us, but you can look it up. It comes from the Osiris Apis, or the Osiris bull. Jesus was a lamb, but they worshipped Osiris, his father, too. So this is why in the Bible, it's John the Baptist that came preaching, and he was had the camel's robe, which is a priestly garb from Elijah, and he drank no wine or ate no meat. So we know that he was a very powerful man. That he ate no meat and drank no wine, didn't come eating and drinking, tells you the priesthood he had, the Nazarite priesthood, where they didn't make sacrifices, they didn't participate in the Aaronic priesthood. There was a higher priesthood. Samuel was one of these priests, Samson, David, Gideon, Deborah. You could be a woman and hold that office. So John the Baptist was not just some guy leading a couple hundred people out in the desert, baptizing a few people, right? No, this was a movement all around the world. And the Essenes were in the Temple of Artemis, as we said. Where's this Temple of Artemis come from? Well, they made temples around the world after these deities. Artemis is, in the Hebrew, Dinah. That was the daughter. There were 12 sons of Jacob, and he had one daughter, Dinah. She's the one who married Shechem, who had a child. It was Asenath that married Joseph when he went down in Egypt. So she was the great high priestess from Diana. And she was considered a kind of a nature deity, like Mother Earth, and she was like pictured as a bull or a deer or something. And she had a bow and stuff. Well, after Heliopolis kind of was destroyed, there was a temple there called Bustasis, which is their way of saying the temple of Artemis or Diana. And this is, of course, where they had the Vestal Virgins. Up there at the temple of Artemis, they spoke in tongues. This was the original religion for hundreds of years before Christ. And they didn't worship Jesus, but they worshiped Osiris and Jesus and his mother. And it was the same teachings as the teachings of Jesus. But we'll show here later, this Osiris was Jesus' father. So we get Osiris and Horus. And both were considered deities, including Isis. And they had temples to her too. And this is the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit that we have here in Christianity. And so it was the same, but it was directed more at Osiris. And in the time of Jesus, when he came along, because the story continues that Osiris dies and Jesus raises him up. So now his son becomes the living king. And we call him Jesus, Isa, Christ. Now, there's so much we could go into. And a lot of this will come to mind as we go. We're going to have to do many videos on this. And this is going to be hard for a lot of you to grasp or to accept at first. I just ask you to listen carefully with an open mind. And you'll begin to see all this come together. And I'm sure right now you don't believe me that there really was the original temple in Jerusalem was actually in Egypt. And all of this, but we'll get to all of that in coming videos. But, so here's the problem. Our Lord and Savior turns out to be some guy in history. Just like the Lord turns out to be Adam in the Egyptian chronology, Atum. Just like Noah, Anu, with his 3 sons, the deities, Elohim, turns out to be a guy named Noah. Okay, who is Brahman? This is a man who's sacred. They almost worship him all around the universe. Every religion goes back to Brahma. Hinduism, Muslims talk about it. Shintoism, Confucius. Everything goes back to Brahma. But that is Abram. So he's the father of the Muslims and the Christians as well. Abram is the father of faith, father of religion, the father of believing and teaching us and giving us the covenant of grace with Melchizedek. So let's dig deep. I'm going to share some things with you that's going to literally open your eyes if you're willing to spend the time to listen. I know a lot of you are saying you're too long and everything, but this is the only choice. To understand and grasp all of this, we're going to have to go through it tediously. There's lots of information. So let's go. Now, here in this webpage, Osiris, Egyptian deity, history and society, table of contents. It says Osiris is called Usur, one of the most important deities of ancient Egypt. The origin of Osiris is obscure. He was a local deity of Busiris in Lower Egypt. May have been personification of the chthonic underworld fertility. By about 2400 BCE, however, Osiris clearly played a double role. He was both a deity of fertility and the embodiment of the dead and the resurrected king. Now, wait a minute. I thought Jesus was the resurrected king. Well, Lazarus was resurrected too. Now, hold on. You'll see who Jesus is. He's not Osiris. Osiris is the king who was resurrected by his son, who is also resurrected. Look at this dual role was in turn combined with the Egyptian concept of divine kingship. The king at death became Osiris, deity of the underworld, and the dead king's son, the living king, was identified with Horus, the deity of the sky. Osiris and Horus were thus father and son. The deitress Isis was the mother of the king, and was thus the mother of Horus and consort of Osiris. The deity Seth was considered the murderer of Osiris and the adversary of Horus. Remember, Seti, I mean, NASA's all crazy about Mars and Seti, right? And Saturn. Well, with the Greek ending un, us, you have Cetus, Setun, or Saturn. And so also Satan from Seth is just the Greek ending. But friends, we have these expressions in the Bible. And it appears that not one, let me repeat this, not one, not any, not one, not two, not three, not even one scholar since the days of Jesus Christ has ever told you this truth. Either they are imbeciles, all of them, especially people who lived in the day when this was being taught. Remember the Serapis Christ? This was the religion. They had the little cross buns on Sunday. They did everything exactly. They had the nativity scene and all the same teachings. Serapis is a very interesting word. Apis was supposed to be the bull. They call it the Serapis bull. But it's actually also seraph or serap, which is serpent. It's interesting that the serpent there in that word itself becomes also the bull. But Serapis is the Christ. So we're talking about this phoenix or this Enoch or Enki that is on the good side, the seventh in line from Adam, Enoch, that the book, our Enoch book tells us is the Messiah, who made the Great Pyramid, the Pillar of Enoch, who survived the flood, the one there at Giza. And so if you look back at all these things that were going on in those days, they all knew about it. These were the mystery schools. They didn't just come up with all of this in a vacuum. Judaism, some of the rabbis may have gotten so blind that they didn't know what any of their stories had to do with anything. They probably didn't know that Abraham was Brahma, the father of faith, Paul says, the father of religion, because all the nations at least spiritually, and I will tell you, he is the father, literally, just as I believe Jacob is the father of all nations. The 72 came from the loins of Jacob, the 72 nations. But it keeps going back, and of course, Adam is the father of all, but also is Noah. Now, these individuals like Noah is Anu in the Sumerian, or the Aranos with his 3 sons, Jupiter, Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus. We have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These are all the same stories. We've gone over this. So, the story, then, definitively, friends, a lot of you out there are like, I don't follow this, Dave. This isn't resonating. Well, you've got to listen a little longer because there's too much for me to share with you in one sitting. I can't lodge that rafter out of your eye in one foul swoop. I must lovingly and tenderly come up and get some tweezers. And, well, first I had to get the rafter out of my own eye. And now I see that there is still a splinter. And to me, it looks a lot like a rafter in everyone else's eye. Because everyone is being blinded by the deity of this world. And everything we've been taught is a cover-up. You've heard of the codification of law. Or they use that word codified. Oh, it's been codified. Well, it had nothing to do with law itself. It has to do with official records. Why were all the official records codified? Literally, they're all written in code. Whether it's Plutarch or Pliny or Josephus. Friends, it was individuals like these who were the priests at Alexandria that wrote history, and the Bible is history. The Bible, Luke was the great physician. But all of the names in the Bible are cover-ups. Mary it's not a name. Mary means a priest. We have proven that. So somebody asked me the other day, well, if Jesus was really Caesarion, the king, the emperor, the pharaoh, the son of Cleopatra, don't you think Pilate would have known that? Yes, he did. That story, it's all in there. I can't get to it, every detail in one video. But all of it is codified. All of it is telling you all this truth. This king died with the plaque saying King of the Jews. They knew who he was. They weren't playing around. All of this stuff has come down to us as just jokes. Right? Jesus walked in the water. Yeah, ha ha. He was son of deity. Ha ha. What does that mean? It means nothing to us Christians except some doctrine. Oh, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. You know, it's just some kind of weird ritual and ceremony that we've been taught and drummed into our head. But the only divine being, whether it be Egyptian, the Enneads, it goes back to the first 10. There were Enneads is 9, but including Adam, there was these 10 deities. And they were the first ones. The first one is Atum, Adam. And these deities go down to Noah. Now listen, these were the divine beings, the archons, the chief of the Elohim, or the children of El. Now, we call them patriarchs, or the father arcs, the father chief ones. But they were the divine beings. And so, our Bible is written in kind of a story that makes it sound very personal, like there's just this little group of people that were the chosen race, but it's a parable about all the world. Adam's the father of all, Noah's the father of all, Abraham's the father of all. And the fact that they had these things that happened to them are representative of much greater things. I've talked about how we look at Abraham as some Bedouin with a turban out in the desert wandering around, but he goes to Bethel and he puts a monument where he had been before, and he makes a monument. Where's his monument? Where is this monument? All over Palestine. We don't see any monuments, not even the Temple of Solomon. They can't find it there. But down in Egypt, we find any monuments, and all of those great monuments were built and dedicated by Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, King David. Solomon built the temple there at Luxor and Memphis and Thebes, that area. And the city of David was up by Cairo, the great Heliopolis. Helios means the sun. Uro, Jerusalem, Uro is the sun. That's the city of the Ra. So now, read this. It says Osiris is the deity of fertility, agriculture, the afterlife, the dead, resurrection, life, vegetation in ancient Egyptian religion. He was classically depicted as a green-skinned deity with a pharaoh's beard, partially mummy-wrapped at the legs, wearing a distinctive Atif crown and holding a symbolic crook and a flail. He's one of the first to be associated with a mummy wrap. I wonder why. Jesus was wrapped and mummified and put in a tomb. Why? Oh, it's some Jewish law. No, it isn't. No, really, where'd they get it from? Where did the world get this? Why were they taking their kings and mummifying them and put them in a tomb, and now we can see the tomb is empty? That's the whole story about Osiris, which happens to be Lazarus. So, and you know, Myrti and Mary and Bethany, I mean, they're from Bethany. That's the house of On. That's On or Anu. In fact, the man's name who was baptizing was On, John. Yeah, John is the father. Oranos, my father is greater than I am. Well, who is your father? Well, if you had known me, you'd known my father. I go unto my father. Where's your father? You don't know my father? He's been preaching to you for how many years now? I'm going to raise him from the dead. I wait for him. Let me show you something. Osiris was at times considered the eldest son of the earth deity Geb. Now, as I've said before, Geb, we also use the word in Greek, Ge, and in Sumerian it's Ki. Ki, Gi, Ge. This is the mother. The sky is Nut. The T is silent, just as the B is silent there. This is how different languages are pronunciated. So, Nu, Anu, right? Noah. The eldest son of Noah, as well as being brother and husband of Isis, brother and husband, and brother of Set, Nephites, and Horus the elder, with Horus the younger being considered his posthumously begotten son. Horus the elder and Horus the younger. Remember in the Bible we have this strange expression that I keep pointing out, that John, who wrote the 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, who is the same person who wrote the book of John, the Gospel of John, and is the same person that wrote the Revelation, and is the one who says, greetings, the elder. Why is he called the elder? In Christianity, this makes no sense because they were all elders. Why is he the elder? Why Peter's just one of the elders, and James and the others are just elders, but he's the elder. What does it mean? Well, it's a very distinctive title. And then he goes on to say, the lady, the chosen lady, greets thee to all her children. Why is all the church her children? Who is this lady? And this word lady in the Greek means literally the Lord, feminine Lord. And here he is, the elder. I'm going to show you in the Bible exactly this mystery of who John was. He was standing at the cross, by the way. And we're going to go over that here in a minute. What Jesus tells John, who is this elder, and his mother. They've got it mistranslated. They're hoaxing you. They've delusioned your minds that when you read it, you can't even see what it says. And I'll show you that here in a second. But I wanted to show you that Horus the elder and Horus the younger. So remember, we've got another man named James the younger, right? The other James isn't called the elder. John is. Now remember also that many times in the Bible where you'll see a person is not always given the same name. We see a woman by a well. She had 5 husbands that were not with her anymore. And the one she was with right now was not her husband. So she was living in sin, or according to the Judean law. And that's the same woman that Jesus restores and takes away the curse because she just touched him. And that flow of blood stopped, which is the curse of the woman. So then you have another Mary, Mary of Bethany, or the house of On. And as the same woman that the Judeans were going to stone, it is the church, because Yahweh wanted to get rid of the church in the wilderness. He abandoned them, divorced them, whatever. And remember, the church is not the Baptist church or the Lutheran church or Jehovah's Witness Society or the Masons or the Catholic Church or anybody. It's mankind. Jesus' body. He died for all. If Christ died, then we died with him. And that if he lives, we shall live with him. All of us are in Christ before the founding of the world. And we will all be in Christ, but each in his own order. So the church is not some body politic. It's not an ecclesiastical office. We're going to appoint an elder. No, you don't appoint him. You point him out. You recognize him. You just honor your elders. Use some common sense. There is no established corporate establishment. There is no organization. There is no signed contract. It's a contract that was signed in your heart. We're not under any... Don't make a vow by heaven or earth, but let your yes mean yes and your no, no. We don't make covenants. Let's see now. You must sign an agreement with me and we'll get married. And if you ever try to leave me, I've got legal authority to beat you. 40 strikes, save one. And if you die within the first 5 minutes, I'll probably get in trouble. But if you linger until morning, you don't die until morning, I get away with it. I'm sorry. That's contracts. That's slavery. Have you read the law? It's slavery. Yeah, under the law, it was just a symbolic, esoteric set of words written for us, upon whom the ends of the system of world system or age has come, the apostle said. It's not something we go by the letter of the law or the literal meaning. Doesn't mean it didn't literally happen. That's not what that means. It means if we take it literally that, oh, you got to die if you do this. Well, what? You know, you throw the first stone. You kill your own mother. Why? Because she did something untoward, you know, to the high priest, or she, you know, whatever. There are no, remember Hosea chapter 6, I design mercy, not sacrifice. Oh, I would like to tell you about what Jesus really meant when he went in there and overturned the tables and said, you're making my father's house a den of thieves. Why is it a den? Isn't a den like a cave for animals? Yeah. What do animals do? They don't steal. They rip apart. The word means a cave, or properly a lair, like a lion's lair. Or I don't know what kind of animals have lairs, but they hide in wait to pounce upon the prey. But it's a cave or lair for an animal to rip other animals apart. He was saying you're slaughtering animals in here. Did you know that the apocryphal book of the book to the Hebrews, the gospel to the Hebrews, which is proven to be a true gospel by the ancient church fathers who quoted from it, it says that until you people cease to sacrifice and slaughter the animals, the wrath of deity shall remain upon you. Yes. You see, I've been telling you about how the good shepherd doesn't kill the sheep and eat them. That's what it says. It says he doesn't eat the sheep and murder them, but he bandages their wounds and he guides them. And they follow him, and he loves them, and he bandages their wounds, and he protects them. That's how he's going to reign, my friends. But, so, yeah, when Jesus said a den of thieves, that's not what he said. In fact, well, let me show you what he was actually quoting. He was quoting from Jeremiah chapter 7. Let me show you that. Now look at this. Oh, man. Oh, I love this. Jeremiah chapter 7. Friends, this is stuff you need to be shown. People should have been talking about this for so long. But your pastors and your scholars and your clergy have betrayed you. But look at this, Jeremiah 7, the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, stand in the gate of the Lord's house. By the way, this isn't Jeremiah, it's Jeremias. And he didn't worship Yahweh. He was one of the great prophets, and he's one of the only people in history, one of the only, other than Elijah, that they were expecting to return. They said, who they say I am? He says, well, some say you're Elijah, some one of the prophets, or Jeremiah, the prophet. So Jeremiah, they was expecting to come back because of the fact that Jeremiah was told to preach again to nations and tribes and tongues. And so the Lord here is Jesus. It's not Yahweh. So it's to stand in the gate of the Lord's house and claim ye there this word, and say, hear the word of the Lord, all ye of Judah. And we're not talking about all of Israel, just Judah, that enter in at these gates to worship the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, the deity of Israel, amend your ways and your doings. I will cause you to dwell in this place. Trust ye not in lying words, saying the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these. Is it saying that's not the temple of the Lord? Trust ye not in lying words, that the temple of the Lord are these. For if ye thoroughly amend your ways and your doings, if ye thoroughly execute judgment between a man and his neighbor, if you oppress not the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and shed not innocent blood in this place, neither walk after the other deities to your hurt, including Yahweh, who is the Molech that they were sacrificing to. Watch. Listen, look at this. It's going to tell you this. Then I will cause you to dwell in this place, and the land that I will give to your fathers forever and ever. Behold, ye trust in lying words. Keep in mind, he says lying words in chapter 7 of Jeremiah. The next chapter, Jeremiah 8, verse 8, tells you specifically what the lying words is. It's the Torah. The Torah is the lying words of the pen of the scribe. You think you have Torah, but you have the lying pen of the scribe. The Torah is a lie because Yahweh sends out his lying spirits to deceive you. It's not a lie in the sense that it's not telling you the truth. Yes, there is a devil. Yes, he does all those things. It's the lie because it's trying to tell you you have to keep these things, and you don't. It's a lie. We don't have to be under that covenant. It says, you go on down here at verse 11. Is this house, which is called by my name, has it become a den of thieves, a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, even I have seen it, saith the Lord. Okay, what is this den of robbers? Let's go to the interlinear of that verse so we can see the word. Okay, a den of thieves become house. Okay, let's look up the den. It's a cave. All right, let's go back. Let's look at the thieves. Violent one. What does it mean? It doesn't mean a thief. It means a violent. Somebody's what? Murdering? It's from Peratz. And that root of that word, or the definition, is to break through. What does it mean to break through? Break out violently upon, sudden judgment, a plague, use violence absolute, to burst open, break it up and rip it. Some scholars say it means to rip open, like a wild animal. Well, animals live in caves, and they rip open the flesh, and they're violent, and they're murderers. It's not just a thief. We're talking about murderous, violent thieves that come in and steal your soul and rip you apart. And that's what they were doing in the temple, is murdering animals. Now, hang on. We're going to go back and prove that final little point that I just made in such a way that you'll never forget it. Go down to verse 22. We'll start with verse 21. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the deity of Israel, put your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices and eat flesh. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. When I came down off of Mount Horeb and Moses went up there and shone bright, I didn't tell you to keep any sacrifices. That's wrong. That's the worship of Molech. That's what it says in Acts chapter 7. That's what it says in Amos. And that's what it's saying here. Or in Isaiah chapter 66. Who told you to make these sacrifices? Anyway, guys, man, we're over an hour. Don't you worry. I already done the other hour. But I'm cutting it off here, and I'm going to load this half and the other half of this video. And I guarantee you it gets better. I mean, it gets interesting. So stay tuned for part 2, which I may upload them both tonight. But please watch them both. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. May the Lord bless you in all things. Yeah, what the puppy just said. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.